Before we begin, viewer discretion is advised. What you are about to hear is not fiction. These are documented cases, real people, and questions that remain unanswered to this day. You have been warned. Imagine you are the last person to see someone alive, and the last place you saw him was near the top of a mountain. Near the top of a mountain, 3,022 feet up, in the rain and the fog, during a race. His name was Michael LeMaitre. He was an Anchorage resident competing in the 2012 Mount Marathon race in Seward, Alaska. Race volunteers spotted him near the summit. The weather was brutal, thick fog, heavy rain, the kind of conditions that swallow a mountain whole. And then Michael LeMaitre simply never came back down. No distress call, no sign of a fall, no indication that anything had gone catastrophically wrong. He was there, and then he was not. And the search that followed found nothing. Welcome to the Alaska Triangle. Search teams deployed immediately. His family joined the search and kept searching long after the official effort wound down. They covered that mountain. They covered the surrounding terrain. In the fog and the rain, in the steep, brutal rock of Mount Marathon, they looked everywhere a man could have gone. And they found nothing. Not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, not a single trace that Michael LeMaitre had ever made it past the point where those race volunteers last saw him. Later that same year, in 2012, he was legally declared dead through a presumed death trial, a court proceeding designed for cases where remains will never be recovered. His family needed to move on, but moving on is not the same as having answers. And the answer to what happened to Michael LeMaitre on that mountain has never been found. He was never found. Not one piece of him, not one thread. Legally declared dead, yes, but never explained. An extensive search by professionals and by his own grieving family produced nothing. A man ran up a mountain in a race he had every reason to finish, was seen alive near the summit, and then ceased to exist. The people who loved him have lived with that silence ever since. And somewhere on that mountain, or perhaps somewhere else entirely, Michael LeMaitre remains. And whatever the Alaska Triangle did with him, it has never given him back. Here is what you need to understand. His story, as devastating and as inexplicable as it is not even close to the most disturbing thing to come out of this place. There are cases in the Alaska Triangle that go beyond one missing man on a mountain, beyond a family left without answers, cases that involve the full power of the United States government, deployed at maximum force, searching for weeks across hundreds of thousands of square miles, and finding absolutely nothing. Cases that suggest the Alaska Triangle is not just a dangerous wilderness. Cases that suggest it is something else entirely. Picture it from above. Imagine you are looking down at the state from somewhere high in the atmosphere, far enough up that you can see the whole thing at once. It is enormous in a way that photographs do not prepare you for. Over 663,000 square miles of wilderness. Mountain ranges that stretch to the horizon in every direction. Glaciers the size of entire states moving slowly, silently across the land below. Forests so dense and so dark that sunlight barely reaches the ground beneath them. And cutting through all of it, nothing. No roads, no towns, no lights. Just the raw, indifferent earth doing what it has done for 10,000 years. Long before any human being ever set foot on it, and long after the last one leaves. Now draw 3 points on that map. Anchorage in the south, Juneau on the southeastern coast, and Utqiaġvik, the city that sits above the Arctic Circle, where in the dead of winter the sun does not rise for 65 days straight. 65 days of unbroken darkness, where the only light comes from the moon reflecting off the snow, and the occasional shimmer of the aurora burning green and violet across a sky that feels too close and too vast at the same time. Connect those 3 points. The shape you have just drawn is the Alaska Triangle, and inside that shape, since 1970, more than 20,000 people have been reported missing. 20,000, in a state with a population of only 730,000. Do the math, do it slowly, and then ask yourself what kind of place produces those numbers, and what it is doing with the people it collects. For the families who are left behind, staring at a phone that has stopped ringing. Some of those families wait for decades, Some of them wait until they die. And still the phone does not ring. Still the wilderness keeps its silence. The wilderness here is not merely indifferent to human suffering. It is something worse than indifferent. It is patient. It waits. And it is very, very good at keeping secrets. And it is not just wanderers. It is not just people who made a mistake, or got unlucky, or underestimated the cold. It is experienced outdoorsmen who have lived their whole lives in these woods. It is military pilots with thousands of hours in the cockpit. It is a United States congressman. Let that one sink in for a second. On October 16, 1972, a Cessna 310 lifted off from Anchorage and pointed itself toward Juneau. 4 men on board, Don Jans at the controls, an experienced pilot who knew these skies. Russell Brown, a congressional aide, Congressman Utqiaġvik of Alaska, and Hale Boggs, the House Majority Leader of the United States Congress, one of the most powerful men in the American government. The weather was not dangerous. The plane was functioning. There was no reason, no logical, rational reason for anything to go wrong. And yet somewhere over the Alaskan wilderness, something went wrong in a way so sudden and so complete that not one of those 4 men had time to pick up a radio and say a single word. No distress call, no mayday, no emergency beacon, no nothing. What came next was the largest air search in American history up to that point. Military jets, Coast Guard helicopters, civilian aircraft by the dozens. The United States government threw everything it had at finding that plane and the men aboard it, because one of those men was the House Majority Leader, and the idea that he could simply vanish without explanation was not something anyone in Washington was prepared to accept. Over 325,000 square miles were searched. Imagine that. An area larger than most countries on Earth, combed by the most powerful search apparatus in the world. For weeks, they found nothing. Not a wing panel, not a seat cushion, not a single personal item that could have floated to the surface of a lake or washed up on a riverbank. The plane had not crashed, it had not sunk, it had not burned. It had simply ceased to exist somewhere inside the triangle with 4 human beings aboard. And it has never been found. Not then, not now, not ever. If the wilderness can swallow the House Majority Leader without leaving a single piece of evidence behind, what chance does anyone else have? But even that pales next to what happened 22 years earlier. On January 26, 1950, a United States Air Force Douglas C-54 Skymaster departed Anchorage. This was not a small plane. This was a military transport aircraft carrying 44 people, crew and passengers both. It was a clear flight on a known route, and the crew reported normal conditions after takeoff. And then the silence came. No distress call, no emergency signal, no indication of any kind that anything had gone wrong at all. The plane simply stopped being where it was supposed to be. Search teams scrambled immediately. They spread across Alaska and deep into the Yukon Territory, scouring hundreds of thousands of square miles of frozen wilderness. For weeks, the search continued. Planes in the air, teams on the ground, everything. They found nothing. Not one piece of a military aircraft, not one personal belonging, not one body. 44 people and an enormous military transport aircraft disappeared into the Alaskan sky and left no more trace of themselves than a breath of steam on a cold morning. Gone. Completely, impossibly, terrifyingly gone. That case has never been solved. It sits open to this day, a gaping wound in the official record, a question that the United States military, with all its resources and all its technology, has never been able to answer. 44 sets of dog tags, 44 families who were told their son or brother or husband had simply ceased to exist somewhere over Alaska. And here was the worst part of all. They could not even be told where. There was no crash site to visit, no grave to stand beside, no physical point on any map that anyone could point to and say, here, this is where it ended. Because there was no here. There was just the sky and the silence and the triangle holding its secret underneath 1 million tons of ice and snow and indifferent ancient stone. Stop here for just a moment and really let that settle in. 2 aircraft, decades apart. No distress calls, no wreckage, no bodies, no explanations. And those are only the famous cases. Those are only the ones that made headlines because powerful people or large numbers of people were involved. The bush pilots, the ones who fly the remote routes every single day carrying mail and medicine and supplies to communities with no roads, they disappear too. Regularly, mid-flight, over terrain they have navigated 100 times before. Their planes are sometimes found years later, half swallowed by a glacier, the cockpit crushed, the instruments still frozen at the moment of impact. But the pilots themselves are almost never recovered. The land keeps them. Whatever you want to call what the land does to the people it takes, it keeps them. And it has never once, in all the decades of searching, offered an explanation for why. And then there is the silence of the dogs. Before we go any further, if this story already has you questioning what is really happening inside that wilderness, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And leave one word in the comments below: triangle. Just that. I want to know how many of you made it this far, because what comes next is the part that no one has ever been able to explain, and I mean no one. Here is what the scientific explanations get right. Alaska is a place of almost supernatural hostility to human survival. The cold is not merely cold, it is a living thing that thinks and waits and finds the gap in your jacket. The moment you stop moving, the second your attention drifts. Hypothermia does not announce itself. It seeps in quietly, and by the time you realize something is wrong, it has already taken your judgment. People in the late stages of hypothermia have been found miles from where they were last seen, driven by a brain that was no longer capable of understanding what was happening to it. Some of them remove their clothing in a feverish confusion, convinced they are burning up while their body temperature drops towards zero. They crawl into hollow trees. They die in hidden places where no search team will ever think to look. The glaciers swallow everything. A plane that goes down near a glacier does not stay where it lands. The ice closes over it within days, moves it, buries it under thousands of tons of frozen water that will not release it for decades. The glacier does not care what it buries. It has buried mountains. 1 small aircraft and 4 human bodies are nothing to something that has been moving since the last ice age. These explanations account for many disappearances. The environment here is designed, through pure geological accident, to erase the evidence of human death as completely as if it were planned. But they do not explain Michael. They do not explain how a man vanishes near the summit of a mountain during a race, in conditions his fellow competitors survived, and leaves absolutely nothing behind. No environmental explanation accounts for a search that thorough. Professional teams, his own family, covering that mountain for months, finding not a single trace. The terrain is brutal, yes. The fog and rain are dangerous, yes. But mountains do not make people disappear without leaving anything. They do not erase a man so completely that even the people who loved him most, who refused to stop looking, came away with nothing. Just a mountain standing silent in the rain. Just the place where a man was last seen, and after that, nothing at all. Something else is happening here, and people have been trying to name it for decades. The theories surrounding the Alaska Triangle are not casual speculation. They are the conclusions of researchers, investigators, pilots, and indigenous elders who looked at the evidence, or rather the complete absence of it, and decided that the only honest response was to consider the impossible. So let's consider it, all of it. The first theory, and the one with the longest history in this region, comes not from researchers or television documentaries, but from the people who have lived here for thousands of years. The Tlingit people of southeastern Alaska speak of a creature called the Utqiaġvik, a shapeshifter, something that exists on the border between the human world and whatever lies on the other side of it. The stories about the Utqiaġvik are not vague campfire tales. They are specific, consistent, and deeply serious warnings passed from generation to generation by people who understood this wilderness better than anyone alive today. The Utqiaġvik learns the voices of people you love. It calls to you from deep in the trees, mimicking the sound of a child crying, a friend shouting your name, a family member in distress. Whatever it takes to pull you off the path and into the dark, it is endlessly patient. It will call for hours if it needs to. And once you are far enough from the fire, far enough from other human voices, far enough into that particular darkness that exists only in the deep Alaskan wilderness, it takes you. According to the tradition, what happens next is one of two things. It either tears its victim apart completely, which would explain why no remains are ever found, or it does something far worse. It transforms them, turns them into another Kushtaka, condemned to wander that same wilderness forever, mimicking voices, luring the next person off the path. No one who has been taken has ever come back. That is not an embellishment. That is the point of the warning. The Tlingit were not telling this story to frighten children into staying close to camp. They were telling it because people kept disappearing, because something kept happening in specific regions of this wilderness that had no other explanation. And the pattern they described, a person wanders a short distance, no sign of struggle, trail ends at a specific point, search teams find nothing, matches the documented disappearances inside the Alaska Triangle with a precision that is very difficult to dismiss. The second theory moves from the ancient to the modern, and it is one that a significant number of serious researchers refuse to rule out. The UFO theory. Alaska has one of the highest rates of reported UFO sightings in the United States, and in 1986, the skies over the Triangle produced something that could not be quietly dismissed. Japan Airlines Flight 1628 filed an official report with the Federal Aviation Administration. Not a rumor, not a campfire story, an official government document, describing 3 unidentified aerial objects that appeared alongside the aircraft over Alaska. The pilot initially assumed they were military craft. Then he realized they were keeping perfect pace with the plane, moving around it in erratic, impossible patterns, and emitting intense bursts of light. The objects were later confirmed by both civilian and military radar. Radar. This was not a hallucination. This was a verified, documented encounter with something unidentified in the skies directly above the Alaska Triangle. And the specific pattern of disappearances inside the triangle, the complete absence of distress calls, the total lack of wreckage, the way aircraft seem to simply stop existing mid-flight, aligns uncomfortably well with what UFO researchers describe as a clean take. No debris, no bodies, no evidence, just gone. Investigators point to the C-54 Skymaster carrying 44 people and ask one simple question. Where does a military aircraft that size go? It does not vaporize. It does not sink without a debris field. If it went down conventionally, something would have surfaced in 50+ years of searching. Nothing has, which leads some researchers to one conclusion: that the plane did not go down at all, that something intercepted it, something that left no trace because it was never supposed to be seen. The third theory is perhaps the most unsettling of all, because it requires nothing supernatural. It requires something almost worse: the deliberate concealment of truth by the United States government. Alaska has been a critical military region since the Second World War, positioned directly across from Russia, filled with classified installations and restricted airspace and facilities whose full purpose has never been publicly disclosed. Some researchers believe the aviation disappearances inside the triangle, particularly the ones with no wreckage and no distress calls, are connected to military activity the government has gone to great lengths to bury. Experimental aircraft, weapons testing, technologies that cannot be acknowledged. When a military transport carrying 44 people vanishes and the subsequent search finds absolutely nothing, it raises a question the cover-up theory answers directly. What if the search was never meant to find anything? What if the people conducting it already knew what had happened, and the weeks of searching were a performance, staged for the families and the press, while the real answer sat locked inside a classified file that no Freedom of Information request will ever reach? And then there is the vortex theory. Researchers who study energy anomalies believe the Alaska Triangle sits above a network of massive, swirling energy vortexes, invisible forces embedded in the Earth itself that affect everything above them. And here is the detail that makes this theory genuinely disturbing. The direction a vortex spins is said to determine its effect on the human mind. A clockwise vortex generates calm, positive feelings. A counterclockwise vortex does the opposite. It breeds confusion, disorientation, paranoia, negative emotions that build without explanation until a person is no longer thinking clearly, no longer capable of making the decisions that keep them alive. Electronic readings inside the triangle have detected significant magnetic irregularities that support this. Search teams operating in the region have reported their compasses running more than 30 degrees off. 30 degrees. That is not a minor calibration error. That is the difference between walking towards safety and walking deeper into the wilderness. And it gets stranger. Some of those same search teams have reported auditory hallucinations while inside the triangle, hearing sounds, voices, things that were not there, which raises a question that is very hard to sit with. If trained search professionals are experiencing compass failures and hearing things that do not exist, what is happening to the people who were already lost inside it? What were they hearing in their final moments? What were they following into the dark? This connects directly to the dimensional theory, which suggests the triangle sits above a region of electromagnetic instability, so extreme it occasionally produces what can only be described as a rupture, a point where the normal rules of space and time become briefly, catastrophically unreliable. The electromagnetic anomalies are documented. Compass needles spin without cause. Pilots have reported airspace where reality itself seemed wrong, where the horizon was off, where time felt distorted, where a disorientation set in that lifted the moment they exited the region. One described it as flying through a thought. Another said the air around the plane felt like something that only looked like air. They both landed safely. They both changed their routes permanently, and neither has ever found an explanation that fits. Because the explanation that fits is one our understanding of physics has no comfortable framework for. What all of these theories share, the Kushtaka, the extraterrestrial, the government cover-up, the vortex, and the dimensional rupture, is the same foundational observation, that what is happening inside the Alaska Triangle cannot be accounted for by the world as we normally understand it. The evidence, or rather the total and consistent absence of it, points towards something operating outside the boundaries of what we have been taught to consider possible. The indigenous people knew it, the researchers know it, the pilots who came back know it, and the 20,000 who did not. They know it too, wherever they are, if they are anywhere at all. Not everyone gets let go. The files in the Alaska State Record offices are not going anywhere. The open cases do not close on their own. They accumulate. Year after year, new names are added to the list, and old names are never removed because there is no resolution to remove them for. No body recovered. No wreckage identified. No explanation that satisfies even the most basic standard of evidence. Whatever happened to the 44 soldiers on that military transport? Whatever happened to Hale Boggs and his pilot and his companions? Whatever happened to Michael LeMaitre on a mountain in Seward in 2012? They went somewhere. Physics demands it. Matter does not simply cease to exist, and the fact that no one has ever been able to determine where is either the greatest collective failure of human investigative capacity in history or evidence that what happened to them is not something our tools were ever designed to find. There are people alive right now who have flown through the Alaska Triangle and felt something they cannot name. Not turbulence, not disorientation, something aware, a certainty sudden and total that the space they were moving through was watching them, that something ancient was making a slow, deliberate decision about whether to let them leave. Most landed safely. Most told themselves it was nothing. But some of them, the ones willing to talk years later when enough time has passed, will look at you and tell you quietly that the Triangle made a choice that day, that they were lucky, and that not everyone who enters that space gets to be. Find those 3 points on the map: Anchorage, Juneau, Utqiaġvik. Trace the lines between them and feel the shape of what you are drawing. Think about the 20,000. Think about the planes with no wreckage. Think about the military aircraft and the 44 souls that ceased to exist one January morning over the Alaskan interior. Think about Michael, the mountain, the fog, the silence where a man used to be. The Alaska Triangle does not hunt. It does not chase. It simply waits. The way the cold waits, the way the dark waits, the way the glacier waits, patient beyond any human understanding of the word. It has been waiting since long before we gave it a name. It takes what comes to it. It keeps what it takes, and it does not explain itself to anyone. And somewhere inside those 3 lines on the map, in the frozen silence between the mountains, the count is still rising.